Hi, good afternoon, Dr. Lynette Holder. Thank you so much for your participation. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks, Raphael. It's a wonderful day here in Barbados. We've had a little rain this morning, and that cooled the temperature down a little bit, as you can appreciate. We are experiencing some very warm temperatures at this time. So, the rain helped, and thus it is a wonderful day.
Absolutely.
How are you? Where you are in Brazil?
Exactly. No, I've been to Barbados 3 times. I love it. I recommend everyone visit. It's a beautiful place, beautiful beaches, beautiful people. It's just a very comfortable environment. So thank you so much for your participation. For those watching this for the first time, the idea of this project is to create a space to invite international experts in business in different markets around the world to talk about the cultural and communication aspects of doing business in their countries. We have here Dr. Lynette Holder from Barbados. And for every interviewee, I've asked 7 questions, and we'll start now. Dr. Holder, tell me a little bit more about you and what kind of work that you do, please.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Rafael, first of all, for reaching out and for having me on the program. It's a pleasure to be here and to share a little bit about what I do, my organization, and also my country, Barbados. At present, I am an administrator in the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector. My background is business administration and integration studies, as well as theology, a rather interesting and maybe diverse set of disciplines. But at present, I head the Small Business Association of Barbados as its CEO, a position that I've been in now for some time, a position that I love. And it gives me the opportunity to bring my background, my training in business administration and in integration studies in particular to this position of CEO. At the Small Business Association, we, as a membership organization, represent micro, small, and medium enterprises on the island with a voice, as we say, for MSMEs here on island, representing them to government, ensuring that we have an enabling business environment for them to function. Also, providing a number of capacity building solutions to help them to grow and to develop. As we all know, research says domestically, regionally, and even internationally, that MSMEs are the engine of growth, if you will, the backbone to developing economies. And so we must have, strong organizations like ours to be in the vanguard and representing small firms. So, that's what I do. That's what I love. And I mentioned integration studies earlier because at the very core of myself, I'm an integrationist at heart. I believe in regional integration and in Caribbean unity. And therefore, I sometimes go to the masters at the University of West Indies, Cave Hill, in integration studies to understand, yes, the theory, so that, in my own work life, if I can put a lot of that into practice and to help advocate for the integration project that we know to be the Caribbean Community or CARICOM to be advanced and to be better operationalized for the interest and benefit of our peoples. So these are some of the disciplines that are core to me, that are very dear to my heart, and they help in what I do on a day-to-day basis.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Holder. I'm going to put the link of the SBA LinkedIn page afterwards, so everybody can learn more about it. And you're absolutely right. And even in my country, many countries, SMEs are the driver of growth. So it's important to give them the resources, open the doors for them to keep growing. So thank you for explaining that. For the second question, what are some things you recommend people to do or say when first meeting and speaking with someone whom they might want to initiate a project or a business opportunity together in Barbados? And also, what should someone not say or do to avoid any confusion?
Right. Okay. Well, Raphael, I say to folks all the time that There's one thing you must understand and appreciate about the Caribbean. And matter of fact, I can maybe speak to the Caribbean first of all, is that our people are very hospitable, very friendly people. And this thread runs through the region. And so persons who are desirous of doing business in the Caribbean, and in particular Barbados, need to appreciate that first of all. We're very hospitable, very friendly people. And so, we tend to scoff at what we call that very stoic personality and persona. And we recommend that you try to avoid that, especially in your initial contact with our people, who are very friendly, very hospitable. So we greet you very warmly. After all, we're talking about tourism destinations. So tourism destinations, would feature people who are very warm, very, very, very open, very affable people, very, extroverted in how they relate, and so on, as tourism destinations. And so we carry that as well in business, in our business interactions. So you'll find that initially, as we meet someone, as we interface with someone for the first time, you'll see that warmth. You'll experience that friendliness and that hospitality. And in turn, we kind of look for that, and we kind of expect that from persons who want to do business with them. So on the downside of that is obviously true. Persons who tend to be very cold and very aloof, can be considered a turn off. And that behavior can be considered very, very offensive. And I would recommend that persons, would try not to come over in that way, especially in your initial interaction with Caribbean people, Barbadians who you're meeting for the first time, who you want to, possibly pursue a working relationship with. And I'll add to that hospitality then opens up the environment, the space for communication, which is the next thing. We in the region, we're talking about the people that are highly literate, people that are very educated, people that like to talk, people that can engage, people that can communicate, and so on. And so I think that warmth and friendliness at the very beginning can then open up the opportunity for conversation around a myriad of topics. I'm sure we'll get to the topic soon, but a myriad of topics that makes it a lot easier for that individual who wants to do business with a Caribbean person, or Barbadian for that matter, to begin to engage.
Thank you. Very true, Dr. Holder. I've traveled a lot in the Caribbean. I've worked on 2 big projects, and I felt that. I reinforced the point. I've always been treated very, very well. I've made some very close friends, strong relationships. So I identify exactly what you're saying, and it's very important, this connection, this human connection. I even say when I'm in the Caribbean that the Caribbeans are a lot like the Latinos, a lot like Brazilians. So in terms of the human connection, so it's very true. So thank you so much, Dr. Holder. Moving to the third question. We recognize that it is important to have a deeper cultural understanding of a local place when doing business there. What cultural aspects might be considered when doing business in Barbados?
Very, very good. Again, I cannot help but refer to our service-oriented culture and service-oriented nature. And as a result of that, we're services based. And as you very well know, the provision of a service is reliant a lot on the individual and the individual's persona, the characteristics, how they interface, how they interact, and so on. And that actually transcends how we do business. And so I would recommend that persons, yes, you do your research. It's always important that you research your markets. You want to know a little bit more about the country or the region that you're interested in from a business perspective. But for us, issues of culture can be seen in how we communicate, our love for food, our love for music. Barbadians and Caribbean people, we love music. Music is an integral part of our characteristic of our persona as a people, the arts and culture and so on. So you'll find that it is said that there's even a rhythm in how we walk as a Caribbean people. There's a rhythm even in how we talk as a Caribbean people, and this goes to yes, our history, how we have evolved as a people, as a region, and so on. So very, very much into as I said, into the arts, into music, food. You can engage easily a Barbadian, a Caribbean person to talk to you about, in the aspect of food, in the aspect of culture, in the aspect of music and dance and all of our countries have carnivals, have these kinds of cultural activities, these kind of festivals throughout the year. So we're talking then about a people that are very much into that kind of expression, that kind of persona and behavior, and we carry that then into business. Now that doesn't mean, let me hasten to add, that doesn't mean that we're not serious when it comes to business, but it means that we tend to be a little friendlier and tend not to approach what we have to do with that very serious veneer. You find that are people a lot more open and flexible to change and easily adaptable to what is required to be done in our interactions, in our relationships, and so on, in our communication. And therefore maybe not as militant and as military. That's a point that I want to get across, because you interface with some cultures, and they are very, very militant. Their persona and their characteristics are very militant. That is not what you'll find in the Caribbean space and in the Barbadian space.
Yes, very true. I've always had a lot of fun, and it's been very easy to work with my Caribbean colleagues when I work in projects. But at the same time, it's always serious. It was always very disciplined. The projects, we always got everything done. But the environment was very, very open and generous, and a lot of fun working with the projects I've had in the Caribbean. So thank you for clarifying that. Thank you so much. Moving to a little bit more of communication aspects. The fourth question is, if someone does not speak English, what do you suggest a foreigner do to be able to communicate more successfully with locals in Barbados and to be able to do business there, for example?
Yeah. Rather interesting question. I mean, the reality is, first thing I recommend is anyone who wants to do business, that you must research your market. So you research the region, you research the country. And if you know that English is not your first language, then it is important to coordinate some sort of service that would can provide interpretation for your meetings, for your conversations, and so on. And that's available. It's easily available, easily accessible in Barbados, and it's highly recommended. Okay, so as not to to create offense, obviously you want to make sure that you can easily communicate, and therefore if you're going to have a meeting, interpretation services can be procured, can be accessed to facilitate the ease of communication. So I would recommend that as a solution to be able to break that barrier if it so exists. Now, understandably, we're talking about business, and so you may have a business meeting set up. You may want to do maybe even an online business engagement, and therefore it's important that beforehand that you try to put that facility in place to ensure that your interactions go well, your meetings go well, that they're productive, be it in person or online. And at the end of the day, the two parties involved can achieve the overall objective. So I would recommend that you can easily procure interpretation services, and it would not be seen as an offensive gesture on the part of Barbadians or Caribbean people for that matter.
Perfect. Very clear. Well noted. So people watching here who are interested in the market there, they'll understand that communication is not a big barrier, so to speak. Moving on to the fifth question, also a little bit in the communication area, to get better results in visibility or sales, what are your recommendations and the most effective ways to do marketing for your products or services in Barbados?
Okay, well, there are three solutions that easily come to mind relative to marketing. One is the use of social media platforms. As you know, this is the age of social media. And in Barbados and the region, there's a very high penetration rate of persons on social media. So it is advisable for anyone who wants to access the market to consider social media, and specifically I'm talking about Facebook, Instagram. These are very, very popular platforms. Business persons tend not to use TikTok as much, and even Twitter is not that widely used, but for sure. You speak to the average business person, especially a small business person, they have a Facebook page, they have an IG platform, and so this is very, 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 very popular, and therefore I recommend that you consider that as one of your solutions. The second one is what we call mainstream media. So you have social media, you have mainstream media, we have a number of very popular, well-known news houses here, news media establishments that are in what we call mainstream media. That is that you can access our newspaper. We have a printed newspaper. We have an electronic newspaper as well. We have radio and television. These are all known as mainstream media. And so that is also another option for the potential investor, potential business person. And it is dependent clearly on your market and the segmentation of your market. Okay. And the third one is what we call direct marketing. Direct marketing, direct promotion to your audience. Now, as you know, the success of marketing has a lot to do with your audience. So you're going to choose the mode of marketing and the mode of promotion, the mode of communication that way, depending on the audience that you're seeking to attract. So if you want, what I consider to be maybe a little younger audience, younger person in business, yes, you're definitely gonna hook them up on social media. You're going to look for their IG page, you're going to look for their Facebook page, etc. All right. And maybe a little more mature, you may focus a lot more on what we call the mainstream media. And then again, depending on who it is, either age demographics, direct marketing is also another very successful mode of marketing that you may want to consider. Okay. But the important point here, the foundational point to be made is your audience. Your audience determines the strategy, the marketing strategy that you use. But suffice it to say, all of these are very popular approaches and strategies in Barbados and the wider Caribbean because of the high penetration rate of persons using the various tools and the various technologies. I mean, a simple thing like WhatsApp, sending WhatsApp messages, sending flyers and promotional stuff via WhatsApp. Again, very, 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 very popular here on the island and here in the region. So again, your audience, your target audience will determine to a large extent the strategy that you use. All right, but bear in mind that all of these approaches are used currently in Barbados and in the wider Caribbean.
Excellent advice. And reinforcing what you made very, very clear. The company that's coming from abroad needs to understand their segmentation, who's their target audience, so and from there develop the strategy, the best strategy channel for promotion. So very clear. Thank you so much. The sixth question, it relates a little bit more to empathy, connecting with the locals. If a business partner in Barbados wants to get to know you better and invites you to a local coffee or tea place, or even to do a virtual happy hour, what are the kinds of topics people in Barbados like to talk about that's not related to business, for example? So the idea is to create this initial empathy, which is important between, because you do business with people. So what do you suggest people talk about that you should be aware of that people talk about in Barbados?
Yeah. Okay. And this follows on nicely from our earlier discussion, I think, when we, we're talking about the culture of the region and of its people. I've found that we can easily avoid politics unless the local person invites you in to talk about politics. I wouldn't recommend that you initiate that. But we do love to talk about politics. That is a fact. We do love to talk about politics as Caribbean people, as Barbadians, but we prefer in the conversation, let us initiate that instead of you bringing that to the conversation. But if we do, you must be prepared to converse and to have that conversation around the subject matter. Other very popular areas include sports, again, depending on the demographic that you're engaging with. Cricket, for example, is a very, very popular topic because, for eons, for years, cricket has been our number one sport, our main sport. We however, we're seeing now, a wide array of sports and persons being interested in tennis, in football, even in basketball. But a sporting topic is always a good topic. And as I said, and maybe I even reiterate it, all of this is against the backdrop of the research that you've done before coming into the space, so that okay, if the person that I'm sitting with and having that conversation with is what we consider to be a millennial, then your topics will be of interest to millennials. If you're talking about the Generation X and maybe not the baby boomers so much, but all the other, depending on the category of person, the demographic of person, your topics then, in my view, should be best suited. Okay, so sports, again, depending on who they are, politics is not necessarily taboo. We can engage in that. Culture in terms of food and entertainment. Entertainment is a very big topic, as you know. Barbados, we're the land of Rihanna, and so many people know Rihanna, and therefore that is always a good topic to talk about music and entertainment. And again, as I said, depending on the age range and the demographic of person, but a wide range. Even international issues, you'll be amazed to know that there are many persons across the region in Barbados who will speak to international issues, who will speak to what's happening in the geopolitical, environment at this point in time, the wars that are going on in other parts of the world, because of the fact that Barbadians and Caribbean people tend to be very widely read. They read a lot. They keep their pulse on what's going on around them. So international news and international affairs can also be a topic of interest. Over that coffee, over lunch, and even over dinner. So the topics vary depending on the demographic that you are interfacing with. But rest assured that in interacting with Caribbean and Barbadian people, you'll come across people, as I said, very well educated, and therefore people who can speak to a range of issues.
Fantastic. And it's good that you reminded us. Many people might not know that Rihanna is from Barbados. A lot of people might not know that, but it's a good insider there. She is from Barbados, and she promotes very well the country. And correct me if I'm wrong. Also, Barbados is a hub for many of these international organizations. So
That's
you have
right. We have a lot of the international agencies that are headquartered here.
exactly,
There's a UN office, United Nations, there's
exactly.
USAID. We have the IADB, the EU delegation. They have an office here. So in light of this, these are all topical issues that you can consider. And I mean, our own Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, is again very, very, very popular. And this is why I mentioned politics early, because of that fact. Because she is very popular, even when I travel, across the world for international conferences, and I say I'm from Barbados. People then will say, "Oh, that's your Prime Minister is Mia Mottley," and so people easily identify with that, and then that is a doorway and an open for conversation, not necessarily in a partisan way, but people identify with that particular leader of a country, and it's a segue, a good opening to have a conversation. So that too can be considered as a topic as well.
Thank you, Dr. Holder. Coming to the last question. What one word should everyone learn to say in English in the context of Barbados, and why should they learn that?
Yeah. Well, you said one word, but I said two words. Thank you. Thank you. You must learn those two words in English. Thank you. I want me saying that because again, I go back to that hospitable nature and character and so on of our people. And so it can be, highly offensive if someone extends a gesture to you and you don't return with a thank you, or at the end of the conversation, thank you for engaging me in this conversation. Thank you for the meeting. Thank you for the breakfast. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for accepting my call. Thank you for acknowledging my email, and for agreeing for us to meet and exchange in this way. So thank you is very important. It is a part of our persona because it says to us that you appreciate my hospitality. You appreciate what I have just done for you in that particular space, and so that you show that you appreciate it. So thank you. Very, very important phrase to remember when you're interfacing with the Caribbean.
So thank you, Dr. Holder. Thank
There
you.
you
We could
go.
be talking for hours. I really enjoy Barbados, the Caribbean. I've traveled there a lot. I really have a lot of appreciation for the region and the friends I've made there. So there's a lot we can talk about and share with our guests, our viewers. But we have to finish this interview. Thank you for being part of this project. Thank you for sharing your insights, your recommendations, your experiences. I hope this interview also benefits you and the SBA Association, and brings opportunities for the association as well. So thank you so much. Any final comments for our viewers?
Yeah, thank you too, Raphael. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the gesture and the opportunity to share a few thoughts. And you're so right. We could have gone on and on and on because there's so much to share, so much to talk about. And I am hopeful that as persons view this broadcast later on, they'll make contact with us, they'll reach out, maybe even partner with us, collaborate with us on capacity building areas, opportunities for small business development in the region, and from wherever your viewers are. We look forward to that, because at the end of the day, this is what it is about: helping our small firms to be able to do better business and help to transform our economies in the region.
Absolutely. I hope so too. Thank you so much and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
very much. Bye bye.